Take it away, Fred.
Thank you very much. It's my great pleasure to announce the award of the Frederick Seitz Memorial Award to Professor Will Happer of Princeton University. This is the decision of the board of the Science and Environmental Policy Project, whose president is here tonight, Kenneth Happer, somewhere in the audience. Ken. And some other board members are here. I see Tom Sheehan, who was introduced earlier, and maybe Dick Forbes is here. And our senior advisor, Randy Randall, Dr. Randolph Randall, who has been a great strength to SEPP. I just stepped down as president last December, and I'm now serving as the chairman, actually as a successor to Frederick Seitz, who was our chairman. Frederick Seitz was also the chairman of the Marshall Institute, and you know, of course, that Will Happer is the current chairman of the Marshall Institute. So Will and I share the distinction of being successors to Frederick Seitz, and I think that's a great honor. Frederick Seitz, for those of you who don't know or didn't know the gentleman, was probably the most distinguished physicist, maybe the most distinguished scientist in the United States during the 20th century. He was the president of the National Academy of Sciences. He was the president of the American Physical Society. He was the president of Rockefeller University. He got the National Medal of Science from the White House and about 40 honorary degrees. Well, what more can I say? And he was one of ours. He really supported us in every possible way, and we really miss him. So we're glad that Will Happer was willing to accept the award, and we look forward to his further support for the causes that we believe in. I would like to say a few words here about Will that were not in the published biography. You have a biography in front of you, so I'm not going to repeat the many things he's done and the many honors he's received and all the inventions he has and everything else. It's all in there. So I'm going to make some personal remarks here about Will and myself and our connections over the years. Will and Fred Seitz and I share one thing in common. We all received our Ph.D.s in physics from Princeton University. Not at the same time, of course. Fred received his in the 30s, I received mine in the 40s, and Will received his in 1964, if I'm correct. But it turns out we were about the same age when we received the awards, about 24 or 25. So we were born exactly 15 years or so apart, and I'm somewhere square in the middle between Fred Seitz and Will Happer. That's my distinction. Now, we also share another piece of history. We have some exotic histories. Will was born in India. I was born in Austria. And we both came to the United States during the first year of the World War II, the war for us. And Will sailed from Bombay. I sailed from Liverpool. I asked Will whether he was concerned about U-boats and being torpedoed, and he said to me, I was only 1 year old. Well, let me tell you, I was concerned because if we had been torpedoed, we would have drowned. We would not be here. Our ship, a British ship, decided to go without convoy and relied on speed. They zigzagged all the way across the Atlantic. Apparently, and they managed to escape being torpedoed. So he went to North Carolina, I went to Ohio, and he continued at the University of North Carolina, and I continued at Ohio State University. So we both made our home in the United States, and we're happy there. But I should tell you that being in the United States was kind of a historic accident for me. I left Austria before World War II, excuse me, and crossed the border into Holland during the same day that Hitler marched into Czechoslovakia. I remember the day very well. And it was quite an accident because if I hadn't got permission to come into Holland and then into England, I would have ended up in Shanghai. That was our plan. I was supposed to go to Shanghai, and I would have spoken to you in Chinese now instead of English. I'm sure I would have become Chinese because I would have lived there. Anyway, I went on from Holland to Northumberland. If you don't know where Northumberland is, it is the northernmost county of England, bordering Scotland, just south of Scotland, which is where Will's father and ancestors come from. So we have a connection there. There is another connection that I want to mention, and that is optics. Will, of course, is preeminent in optics, and I mean optics in a very advanced sense. He's done fabulous work in the field of optics, particularly with lasers. He's made inventions that benefit humanity through medical practices. My exposure to optics was very, very low class. And when I was 13, I left formal education and became an apprentice in an optical machine shop. And by the time I was 14, I was an optician in Northumberland, working as an optician. And much later, I entered college and became an electrical engineer, and we both ended up at Princeton at different times, to be sure, but got our Ph.D.s finally. I want to mention one more thing. I think I would stop. I don't want to make this too long. There's so much that we could talk about. I want to tell you that we miss Fred Seitz very, very much. He was a great inspiration to us, and we hope that Will Happer will turn out to be another Fred Seitz. He certainly has the makings of it. He can become an important statesman in science, not only as a scientist, but also in the political area. We'll see what happens next year in the election. Thank you very much for your attention. And now the presentation.
Oh, beautiful.
The Fred Seitz Memorial Award. The Fred Seitz Memorial Award. There could not be a more deserving recipient.
Well, thank you so much, Fred, for the very, very kind introduction, and for this wonderful award, which I'm very honored to receive. I too knew Fred Seitz very well, and many of you around here probably did too, but maybe some of you didn't. You know, Fred took a lot of abuse for his support of what we're doing. Just out of curiosity, this evening before I came here, I looked up the Wikipedia article on Fred. You know, it was just disgraceful, you know, one calumny after another of a very great man. But, you know, there are many people who share that honor, and sitting around here this evening. You know, one of the things that irritated me most was, you know, Fred supposedly took all this money from tobacco companies, and it's true, Fred took quite a bit of money from Reynolds tobacco when he was president of Rockefeller University. But he didn't use the money for studies of tobacco. One of the most famous uses was for Stan Prusner's work on prions. Poor Stan couldn't get any support from the Institutes of Health or NSF because he had this crazy idea that maybe mad cow disease had something to do with protein folding, and was transmissible. So this was considered just complete heresy, and no one would support him. So the only one who supported him was Fred Seitz, and of course, Prusner eventually got the Nobel Prize. He was dead right. And so Fred did many, many things like this, which don't get reported on, but which those who knew him and know a little bit about the history of science know a lot about. And he was a great man, and so I'm so pleased to get this award. And I was particularly touched to get it from Fred because I got to know Fred for the first time when I was director of energy research here under Bush Sr. And I said, well, we're supporting all this work on climate. Who can tell me about climate? And so my assistant secretary at the time says, well, Fred Singer knows all about it. I'll have him come in. So I don't know if you remember this, Fred, but you came in and you briefed me. And I must say, I said, who was this guy? He really knows what he's talking about. And so, I've continued to learn from Fred through the years. And so thank you, Fred, for the free tuition. I owe him $50,000 like you. Okay, so let me I know we've all had a very nice meal, and thanks to the Heartland Institute for that and this wonderful occasion. And so I'm supposed to tell you a little bit without completely putting you to sleep at the end of a long day where you've heard many, many serious things, something that's maybe worthwhile. And so I'm going to talk about Alice in Climate Land. And so many of you have read Alice in Wonderland. And I must say, after I first had my lecture with Fred, I thought, good grief, is this Alice in Wonderland here that I'm getting into? And sure enough, let's see, you remember when Alice falls down the rabbit hole, she finds this little table and there's a bottle on it, and the bottle says, "Drink me." And poor Alice, not being very sophisticated, drinks it. And when I got into this area and started learning about it, I learned that when I looked at CO2, I should assume that it caused harmful warming, that it was pollution, carbon pollution, that it would cause terrible climate change, extreme weather, Noah's flood, whatever you think. And I remember thinking, are they mad, And so this whole area, you get this sense of insanity, that's floating around, that people... And, the old saying, Euripides, one of his plays, he says, whom the gods would destroy, they first make mad. And there's Euripides, making this quote, and here's a true believer, in Climate Land. And honestly, when I talk to my friends at Princeton, maybe you've got more sensible friends where you live, but they're just like this person here. First person Alice meets in Climate Land is the Cheshire Cat. So I'm fond of cats. Barbara and I had a cat that looked a lot like this. And so the cat says to Alice, Alice says to the cat, I don't want to go among mad people, Alice remarked. Oh, you can't help that, said the cat. We're all mad here. I'm mad, you're mad. Well, how do you know I'm mad, said Alice. Oh, you must be, said the cat, or you wouldn't have come here. And so here we all are, Okay. So, it goes downhill from there. When I got to Climate Land, I discover, and it's been more clear as the years have gone by, that you're supposed to believe in climate models that don't work at all. Many of you have seen this graph many times today. It's a wonderful graph from John Christie, Roy Spencer's colleague. showing observed temperature anomalies versus climate model predictions, they're not even close, and yet you're supposed to take, this emergency seriously, when this is how well they can do. And it's not just one of us. John Christie's really one of us. But it's also Nature. This is a picture from Nature a year ago, which is exactly the same story, that the distribution of predictions of models is way, way high compared to the observations, which are these hatched bars here. So there's just no question that the models don't work at all, and yet we're supposed to believe them and think that, this is an existential threat to the world. Well, let's talk about some of the additional things you have to believe when you're in climate land. Well, there's always a rush, If we don't do something by the time of the next conference, the world is finished. And so here's a climate bureaucrat, and he's checking his watch, to see how much time's left to save the planet. I've been listening to this rabbit, for 15 years, and it's always just around the corner when there's a tipping point and the end is near. And let's talk about how long it really takes. So I think everybody knows that the radiative forcing from CO2 is such that if you double it, you get a temperature rise, and if you double it again, you get the same temperature rise. It's got this funny property that it goes as the logarithm of the CO2 concentration. So here's CO2 concentration going along the bottom curve here, and here are possible doubling sensitivities. 4 degrees is actually the first published doubling sensitivity. It was published in 1908 by Arrhenius. And so that's Arrhenius' number. It's only slightly bigger than the IPCC, most likely number 3 Kelvin here. So they didn't make much progress since Arrhenius, but they spent a lot more money. And but anyway, if we take the most likely number from IPCC, 3 degrees Kelvin, it takes 117 years to get a 2-degree temperature rise. So you have to ask yourself, really, what is the rush? I mean, why can't we wait? Why can't we wait another 10 years and be sure we understand this before we spend trillions of dollars, on upending the world's economy and all the other horrible things? And in fact, even 3 degrees is almost certainly too big. There's a lot of evidence that it can't possibly be even as big as 2 degrees. I've talked to a number of you. 2 degrees, there's 200 years before you reach the magic 2 degree of warming. In fact, the feedback-free number for warming from doubling CO2 is actually only 1 degree, or plus or minus 10% or something like that. That takes 600 years. Again, this is truly a mad issue. Why am I worrying about something where I have 600 years to think about getting right, and I have to do something this year and in time for the Paris Accord, right? So this is really crazy. It's one thing I think we want to make clear is that I think everyone in this room is probably an environmentalist. We want to live in a clean environment. We don't want to screw up this beautiful planet we live in. So, My wife Barbara and I, our son taught in the American school in Shanghai. This is Shanghai. There's the Pearl Tower. There's a bottle opener building, and this is it's a pretty good day in Shanghai. I personally don't want to live in a city like that. And so there's nothing wrong with cleaning this up. But if you can see this stuff, it's not CO2. This is not CO2 you're looking at, and yet we're living in the times when we're constantly trying to be brainwashed into thinking that this is CO2. We're looking at CO2. It's not CO2 at all. It's just ordinary smog, which you could get rid of, and they should get rid of it. The reason it's there is because of corruption in China, that the people who build power plants and steam boilers don't bother to put in even the most elementary pollution control stuff. Even electrostatic precipitators aren't installed. And so this is easy to fix compared to CO2, which doesn't need fixing. So, well, anyway, you can, this is, anyway, let me make it clear. This is not CO2. Okay? And we should make it clear to all of our fellow Americans, this is not CO2. Okay, well, so here are two things that are breathing. Here's a coal power plant, and there are the cooling towers, and here's the steam coming out. Again, it's not CO2. There's Alice breathing. She's emitting steam too. She's also emitting CO2, but if you look at their breaths, they're not that different. Alice's breath is about 4% CO2 for 40,000 parts per million. It's about 6% water, 15% oxygen. That's why you can give people mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, because your breath still has a lot of oxygen in it. You can revive them just breathing into them. The power plant uses up more of its oxygen. You don't want to waste too much, but it's typically got 5% oxygen and then CO2 and water. So it's exactly the same as Alice's breath, except a slightly different mix. But they're the same order of magnitude. And so, you know, the amount that each of us emits is not trivial. We breathe out about 1 kilogram of CO2 a day, a little bit less. And so that's 1/3 of a ton a year. So if you actually calculate, you know, what the human population, whatever we are, 7 billion, you know, it's not trivial compared to the fossil fuel emissions. It's, you know, 5 or 10%. So if we're going to get rid of, you know, carbon pollution, does that mean we get rid of people? And don't ask the question, because you won't like the answer. All right. Okay. And of course, we all know there's this remarkable greening going on all across the globe. This is a satellite picture of chlorophyll bands from Donahue. All of us know about that. And the greening is most intense in arid regions, the Sahel here, the Western Australia, Central Australia, where plants are under water stress. So more CO2 means they need less water, so they grow better. Western India, there's where I was born, right in the south of India. Since I believe, Fred, the first winner of this wonderful award was Sherwood Idso. Am I right about that? Anyway, I can't resist showing this picture of Sherwood Idso, one of my heroes, showing the effects of CO2. Again, this is a curve I hope many of you have seen many times before, but this is a pine species growing in different amounts of CO2. Ambient at the time the experiment was done was 385, and 200 parts per million more, another 100 parts per million more and more. But you see, the living plant world absolutely loves CO2. It doesn't have enough CO2, and much of the increase of crop yield we're getting today, or a significant part, not all of it, is coming from more CO2. And so we need to get that message out. Do you really want to throw away 15% of the world's food production by bringing CO2 back to 350 or whatever the crazy number is McKibben wants? Okay, so, well then, you know, another thing Alice discovers when she gets to Wonderland is that you don't play by the same rules. So, for example, if you play croquet, your mallet is a flamingo, and your ball is a hedgehog. And so it's a little bit like, you know, renewable energy. And instead of using a reliable coal or natural gas plant, you've got a solar panel farm. This is just outside of Princeton. This used to be a beautiful cornfield. I liked the cornfield a lot better. And this is a windmill farm in California. I think it's Altamont. And again, today and perhaps tomorrow too, you'll hear a lot about the problems of trying to run an economy on solar power and wind. It really doesn't work much better than trying to play croquet with a flamingo and and a hedgehog. All right, so we got to get that message out. Okay, it's not, doesn't make much sense. Here's my good wife, Barbara, at another solar farm in New Jersey. Again, this is just beautiful land being despoiled by these ugly solar panels. It was better when it was meadow. You know, I think everyone knows to equal one, you know, gigawatt power plant, you need thousands of acres of this. It's just outrageous, you know. It doesn't make any sense. And then you have to wonder, what happens when they run out. So here is Altamont, but here is Tehachapi in California. Here are windmills that have stopped working. And so what do you do with these damn things? They're all rusting away here, and they're using up real estate. Well, in Wonderland, here's what they did. They had this long table like the ones we're sitting around here, and so after your dishes got dirty, you simply moved a couple of places to the right, so it was a sufficiently long table that you could just abandon what you had before. And that's what they're doing in California now. They're not cleaning them up. They're sitting there rusting away. Well, here's another thing that Alice experienced. As she was going to visit the Queen, she discovered these poor lackeys painting a white rose bush red. And that's because the Queen didn't like the white rose bush. And it's a little bit like data on temperature. Here's raw data on the temperature in the United States. It's quite hot in the Dust Bowl days, but now it's been massaged by our government. Our government's here to help us, and so now the massage data is this red data here. It's a little bit like the red roses. It's as phony as the red rose, but we see it again and again and again. You can't trust data anymore. And again, there have been much more serious talks about that today. It's a serious problem that makes this an extremely difficult thing to fight. Well, everyone believes in computer models. When Alice was in Wonderland, she comes to this modeler here. It's the caterpillar, and he's sitting on his model, a mushroom. And it turns out this mushroom will do anything you like. If Alice nibbles on this side, she shrinks. If she nibbles on this side, she gets big. And so that's the way models are. You want warming, I'll get it for you, sir. You want cooling, it'll give you cooling too. Whatever you like, my model protects, So. Okay. Yeah, okay. I hope you could hear. Visually, I hope you can see. Okay. And then, having reasonable discourse is not all that easy in climate land. This was what Alice encountered in Wonderland. This is the trial of the Knave of Hearts. And the Queen's comment, well, sentence first, verdict afterwards. So we've all experienced that, if you have ever tried to step forward and argue with these people. They don't argue, it's off with your head, just like the Queen, the Red Queen. Well, fortunately for Alice, this nightmare, and it was a nightmare, she had a dream. It eventually came to an end, but just before it ended, she says to the Queen, the Queen says, off with your head. And Alice says, well, you're nothing but a pack of cards, a house of cards, basically. And in fact, this whole climate scare is a house of cards. There's no question about it. It's a house of cards. But unlike Alice, who was able to wake up and everything turned out well, and her sister calmed her down, when we wake up tomorrow, climate land is still going to be here. So we've got a harder problem than Alice has. So what can you do? And off with your heads. There you go. There you go. Well, if I knew the answer to this question, I wouldn't be here. I would have already given the answer, and we would be okay. So I think we all have to think carefully about this one. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I'm going to give you a few suggestions, okay? And so the first suggestion comes from one of my American heroes. This is Mark Twain. And this is this is a very true statement. It's easier to fool people than it is to convince them they've been fooled. And so that's one of our problems, that lots of our fellow citizens have been fooled, and it's very hard to back off, without looking like a fool yourself. And so if we had realized earlier when this started and tried to stop the propaganda campaign before too many people got hooked, I think it would have been easier. Of course, we didn't realize the direction it was going. I remember I was there. I didn't take it seriously. I couldn't believe anyone would take it seriously, but they did. And Mark Twain's second piece of advice is, when in doubt, tell the truth. It will confound your enemies and astound your friends. So let's talk about what is the truth. So the truth, I think, is very simple, and that is that we should all be against real pollution. You know, if there's anything we can do to keep our homes looking like Shanghai, we should do it, and maybe we can help the Chinese clean up Shanghai. They're actually moving in that direction. It's getting better, partly because they're getting more prosperous as a result of having lots of cheap fossil fuel energy. And so we have to continue using fossil fuels. Responsible use of fossil fuels is a huge benefit to humanity. So we've got to push back vigorously on the demonization of fossil fuels. They're not demons at all. They're enormous servants to us. We've got to push back on this myth that CO2 is a pollutant. It's not a pollutant. It will not cause catastrophic global warming. That's already clear from all of the observations. The models are crap. They don't work. And in fact, CO2 is very, very good for the planet, for plant life. Plants are growing much better. You can see that not only crop plants, but wild plants. Everything is doing better. Even plants in the sea are doing better. And so, in fact, the social cost of carbon, I got the acronym wrong. Anyway, social cost of carbon is probably negative. There is no cost of carbon dioxide. Yeah. Okay, so I'll close with a couple of slides. This next slide is actually devoted to our hosts here, the Heartland Institute, which I tremendously admire for their courage. They've taken enormous amounts of abuse. They're demonized, vilified, and yet they hold their heads up and they move forward. So God bless the Heartland Institute. Yeah. So this is for the Heartland Institute, and I don't know how many of you know this legend, but it's about the founding of the state of Bulgaria by Khan Kubrat. And so the Khan was dying, and he gathered his sons around him. His sons are a little bit like us. We're sort of the sons of the Heartland Institute here, sons and daughters of the Heartland Institute. And he had them bring in a bundle of sticks. And so I took the liberty, coming down on the train, to loot the coffee sticks at the on Amtrak. So this is courtesy of Amtrak, you know, so you'll pay a little more in taxes because I stole them from Anyway, the Khan says, break these sticks. Well, I can't break the damn sticks, you know. There are too many of them. I've got a whole bunch of them. And so his sons tried to break the bundle of sticks, and they couldn't break the bundle of sticks. And so the Khan then, he's very old and he's feeble. He can just barely talk. He picks up the sticks one by one and he breaks them. Okay, he breaks them one by one. So the message here is very true, that we need to stick together. And you've seen that again and again. I was so proud of this community for sticking up for Willie Soon. And so as the Khan says, so we never become other people's slaves. And the final message, I think all of us are familiar with Winston Churchill: never give in, never, never, never. Okay, thank you very much.